to go, you're already there. And if I go to the heavens, rise on the wings of dawn, if I settle by the sea, I know your hand is always there to guide me. You are there, you are there, you are there, you are there. Where can I go? Where can I go from your presence? Trouble is in my way, you're already there. You will not go from my presence. Word of mine is said, if in the depths I lay my head, in the shadow of your wings you're there to hide me. You are there, 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 you are there. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got my faith in the Lord. I'm so glad I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the love of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got my faith in the Lord. I'm so glad I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the love of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord.
God's wings, my soul relaxed, and now I live with him.
Hello, welcome to our Bible study. My name is Clint McElroy. Today we'll be in the second half of 2 Samuel chapter 13. I do want to give everyone a heads up. This material today is of a mature nature and you should review it before showing it to children. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m., so please join us if you can. Hope to see you there. Masks will be available at the door for anyone who needs one. If you're sick in any way, please don't come to the auditorium, but instead stay home and enjoy the streaming service. We'll also be meeting for Bible classes at 9 a.m., so please join us for those if you can. You're welcome to join us in the auditorium to watch this class on the large screen. We want everyone to know we have these English Standard Version Bibles from the World Bible School available. If you care to have one, please contact our church office and we'll make arrangements to get you one. Our sick list is very, very long, so please do look at our bulletin for more information. Our sympathies are extended to the family of Dorothy Spicer, who passed away on March 4th. Services were March 12th. Our sympathies are also extended to the family of Norma Ferguson, who died on March 3rd, and services were on the 12th. Our prayers go up for Brenda Stockton, who has asked for our support, so please keep her in your prayers. Diane Aycock has had good news. She's had her surgery and is recovering. Please continue to keep in your prayers Carmen Rohrman, Sharon Payton, Glenda Wood, the grandmother of Joseph McWhorter, James Howard, Emma Richardson, Jeanette Inman, Betty Smith, Jerry Clack, Don Jones, Marianne Kinsey, April Askew, Donnie Glenn Dixon, and I would ask that you keep in your prayers my friend David Garza, who is recovering from cancer. He's had good news and has finished his most recent round of chemo. And also keep my son, Michael McElroy, in your prayers. He woke up Saturday morning with a respiratory infection, and we're very concerned about him. We also want to remember Jeff Amix's mother. Jeff is with her now. As is our custom, we want to remember the story of the two men on the road to Emmaus who were joined by a third man on the way. When they got to their destination, Jesus revealed himself to have been that third man and then parted from them. The two men remembered that while Jesus had been with them, there had been a burning in their hearts. It's that burning that they had in their hearts in the presence of Jesus that we hope to kindle in our own hearts by drawing closer to the Lord through a study of His Word. We also want to remember the admonitions of Leviticus chapter 19, to be holy, for the Lord our God is holy. We also want to keep in our thoughts the stories of Rehoboam, Jeroboam, and the prophet that came to Jeroboam. Rehoboam listened to the advice of young, inexperienced advisors rather than older, wiser men, and as a result, the northern tribes became discontented and separated themselves from Rehoboam's kingdom. The northern tribes were led by Jeroboam, who had been told by God while Solomon was still on the throne that he would lead the northern tribes when they separated from the kingdom. He lived in exile until Solomon passed and then came back and took over the northern kingdom just as God had told him. But instead of doing what God had told him to do, which was lead them in the same way that David had led, he chose to raise up high places in the mountains and told the people of Israel that they should worship their God there, the God that led them out of Egypt. He set up 2 golden calves, one in each of the high places, and set up a false priesthood to facilitate the people's worship there. All these things were an abomination before the Lord, of course. It was counted as sin against Jeroboam and every king that ruled over Israel after Jeroboam. Many of those kings may have had very little else that God held against them. God counted them as sinners because they had done these things. They supported these high places in the mountains. God didn't just let Jeroboam do this. He sent a prophet. That prophet came and told Jeroboam that he was doing wrong. Jeroboam resolved to do it anyway. As that prophet went on his way home, he was met in the way by another prophet, a prophet from Israel. And that prophet told the first prophet that he should come and eat with him. He just wanted the honor of his presence and told the prophet a lie that God had told him he should come join him. The first prophet believed the second prophet and went and ate with him. And God took that man's life as he left the presence of the second prophet to go on the rest of his way home. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible story. It's a story that admonishes us to remember that when we have the truth, and choose to believe a lie, we will be held accountable. And I believe that that's why the story is there and recounted in the way that it is, because the people of Israel believed the lie of Jeroboam going forward, and it was counted against them. So that's why we study. We go to Scripture so that we'll know what the Lord has said. We'll know when we hear a message whether or not that message is from God. If that message is from God, then great, we've got a message from the Lord. But if that message is inconsistent with what has been told to us by God already, then it is not God's message, and we should reject the message and the one that brings it. So I hope that you would bear with me as we study together. If you find that I've misrepresented something in the Scripture, I hope that you'll come to me and let me know, that you will study with me and that we can find the truth together. I hope you'll find a word of encouragement in today's lesson from the second half of 2 Samuel chapter 13. 2 Samuel chapter 13 from the English Standard Version, starting in verse 23. After 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. And Absalom came to the king and said, Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant. But the king said to Absalom, No, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you. He pressed him, but he would not go, but gave him his blessing. Verse 26. Then Absalom said, If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us. And the king said to him, Why should he go with you? But Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Then Absalom commanded his servants, Mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, Strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. Verse 30. While they were on the way, news came to David, Absalom has struck down all the king's sons, and not one of them is left. Verse 31. Then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants who were standing by tore their garments. But Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, said, Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. Now therefore let not my lord the king take it to heart, as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead. Verse 34. But Absalom fled, and the young man who kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him, by the side of the mountain. And Jonadab said to the king, Behold, the king's sons have come. As your servant said, so it has come about. Verse 36. And as soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also, and all his servants wept very bitterly. Verse 37. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son day after day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And the spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom, because he was comforted about Amnon, since he was dead. Okay, so last week we studied out of the first part of chapter 13, and of course the events of chapter 13 are tied back to the events that transpired as we read out of chapter 11 and 12, where David committed that sin with Bathsheba and tried to cover it by calling Uriah the Hittite in from the battlefield. And when Uriah the Hittite did not do those things that David anticipated he would do when he came home from the battlefield, he sent orders back with Uriah the Hittite that Joab was to set him in the fiercest part of the battle and leave him there to die, which Joab did. And so Uriah the Hittite was killed by the sword of the Ammonites. And in chapter 12, we see that the Lord sent Nathan the prophet to come to David. And I'm not sure if this is Nathan, David's son, or not, but Nathan came and told David the story of the rich man and the poor man, how the rich man had taken the poor man's one lonely lamb and prepared it for a traveler who visited him rather than serve that man from his own flocks. David was outraged by this and said that this man should be punished, and Nathan said, You are the man. And then Nathan pronounced the judgment of the Lord against David. And I do apologize. I realize there's some background noise, but I'm just going to have to continue over it. When I started recording, everybody and their dog seems to have come by my house, and I'm right by the road, so everything that happens in the street is just coming up, and I can't stop the dog from barking, and I can't put a roadblock up. So there you go. Nathan said to David, "You are the man, thus says the Lord." And he pronounced the judgment of the Lord against David. And David said, "I have sinned," in verse 13 of chapter 12. Nathan said to him, "The Lord has put away your sin. You shall not die." So he delivered him from the demand of death for the sins that he committed, which were many. David did many, many things that were wrong in chapter 11. But he did pronounce that there would be a judgment on David, and that would involve these kinds of things that we have read about in chapter 13, and we're fixing to review those things. But I do want to say one thing. I do appreciate Scott's sermon on Sunday. Scott has a little bit different opinion about the events of chapter 11 than I do, and he shared that, and I think that is absolutely important, that we consider the events of chapter 11 in the light of many different perspectives. Certainly, I've told you what I think happened between David and Bathsheba. That is my personal opinion, and my personal opinion clouds the rest of the story as I've related it to you. So it is absolutely imperative, I believe, that we also look at that story through the lens that Scott shared with us through his sermon this past Sunday. So I do appreciate his sermon, and I appreciate his perspective, and I believe that perspective is worthy of all consideration. So please, if you haven't heard Scott's sermon from Sunday, please go listen to it, because it's very important, and it gives a very enlightened view of the story of David and Bathsheba. And specifically, it is that Bathsheba was not innocent in those events, as I tend to believe. And I believe that not just because of the story as recounted in chapter 11, but because of how the events of chapter 13 unfold. Now, there's no real tie between those events as far as their conduct, but because God has a tendency of visiting judgments upon people after the sins that they've committed, I tend to believe that it is an indication that the events of chapter 11 were a certain way. That's not to say that I'm right, and I don't know that I'm right. And that's why it's very important that we consider alternative beliefs, alternative possibilities. So I do love Scott's sermons, and I hope that you will benefit from them if you have not already. Now, that said, I will continue to give my opinions about these passages that we read based on my perspective and based on my personal conviction that the things that David did were of a similar nature to what Amnon did with Tamar in chapter 13. Last week we studied out of chapter 13 that Amnon was taken by Absalom's sister Tamar. Now, Tamar was the family name in the Judah. Tamar was the name of one of the wives of the sons of Judah out of Genesis. We read a short story there about how Judah's first son was married to a woman named Tamar, and when he died because he was not acceptable to the Lord, according to their procedures, the next eldest son was to take the wife of the eldest son, if she had not given birth to a child, and provide her a child. And that second son also failed to do that correctly and was killed by the Lord. And the third son of Judah was a son that was too young to be married off and given in this relationship. So Judah made an agreement with Tamar that he would send his son, this last son, to Tamar once he was old enough. But he did not abide by that agreement. And as a result, Tamar tricked Judah when he was on a quote-unquote business trip. She led him to believe that she was a cult prostitute at the city gate, and he slept with her under the conditions that she would hold his signet ring, his cord, and his staff until he provided her a goat. And of course, she was not really a prostitute, so she didn't wait around until he brought back the goat. And when he sent a servant with the goat, she was gone. A few months later, she turns up pregnant, and Judah was informed that she was pregnant, and he wanted to have her killed. So he sent for her to have her put to death, and she brought that staff, she brought that signet ring, and she brought that cord, and Judah had to accept that he had done an unrighteous thing, that her righteousness was greater than his own. And it is that child from Tamar that became the son of promise in the family of Judah that led to this point in time. So Tamar is a very popular name, and now we see that Absalom has a sister named Tamar. So she was apparently a very beautiful girl and a virgin, and Amnon was taken with her. He was consumed with lust toward her. It says in the verse 1 that he loved her, but I prefer to think of this as infatuation. He was completely taken with her, infatuated with her, and lusted in his heart after her. And he had done this so much that he became ill, it says in verse 2, because he lusted for his sister Tamar, and it seemed impossible to Amnon that he could do anything about it. But this friend of his, Jonadab, that we'll see later in the chapter as well, the son of Shemaiah, I'm saying Shemaiah, it may be Shemiah, but I'm trying to be consistent and say Shemaiah, who was David's brother. Jonadab was a very crafty man, it says in verse 3, and he had a plan. So he had this plan. He approached Amnon and said, "Why are you so haggard morning after morning? Tell me what's up with you." And Amnon confessed to him, "I love Tamar," in verse 4, my brother Absalom's sister. Jonadab had a plan, and he immediately told him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill, and when your father comes to see you, tell him that you want your sister Tamar to come to you, prepare bread, and then she will prepare bread in your sight and feed it to you." So Amnon took that advice. Now this is my little point of contention there. What was going to happen after that? Now there were not many options. So Jonadab's advice and plan led to this thing, and Amnon followed that plan, did exactly what Jonadab had suggested. And indeed the king came and then sent for Tamar to come and prepare bread for her brother Amnon, which she did. And she prepared this food, and Amnon was apparently there in her presence as she prepared it. And again, I expressed that I had some questions about that whole circumstance, where she had prepared it, why Amnon was in her presence directly as she prepared it, not apparently in his bed. And then he sent out all of the servants in their presence. And again, what were the servants doing if they were not preparing bread? Just one question after another. But basically, it culminates in the execution of the plan. Amnon says, "Hey, Tamar, bring those loaves of bread that you've made into me and feed them to me while I'm laying on my bed in my chamber." None of the servants are around, so Tamar goes in, and Amnon takes her and forces her. She says, "No, my brother, do not violate me." In verse 12, "For such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? As for you, you will become as one of the outrageous fools in Israel." I'm slightly paraphrasing there. "Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." So it looks like she's under the impression that the king would actually allow them to be together, which in my view is still incest. Even under the law, it would still be incest. But she was she was under the impression, apparently, and maybe she just wanted to make Amnon stop. That part of it's unclear to me. But he would not listen to her in verse 14, and being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. So it's a terrible thing that he did, and immediately he hated her with very great hatred. So this is a key indication of infatuation rather than love. Love is a very particular thing, and we have very good definitions of what love is if we'll go and read them. And what Amnon had in his heart toward his sister Tamar was not love. It was, in fact, something quite different from love. And one of the key indicators of that is that there is no way to fulfill that and remain in it. So he had this hatred grow in his heart, a resentment toward her that was greater than the love with which he had loved her, it says in verse 15. He says to her, "Get up and go." And she said, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. So he had done this thing to her, and she was arguing that now to send her away was even worse than the first thing. And I agree that it was bad, but I'm not sure that it was worse. But it was a thing that he should not have tried to deny. He should have owed up to it and paid the price right there. But he did not do so. He called for his servant to take her and force her out of the room and bolt the door after her. So she was cast out. She had a long robe on with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed, it says in verse 18. And having put her out, she tore the long robe and put ashes on her head and lay her hand on her head. I envision it this way, like a woman in peril that you might have seen in traditional art. That's the way I envision that, not to make light of the situation. But Tamar put ashes on her head, tore the long robe that she wore, and laid her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went. And her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. It is your brother. Do not take this to heart." So I think he was trying to comfort her and basically told her, "Leave this to me. I'll take care of it." I don't think he was telling her that it was no big deal. It was a big deal. And Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. So it was a terrible circumstance. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And in a footnote, it says from the Dead Sea Scrolls, there was the additional line, "But he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him since he was his firstborn." And if we go back and look in chapter 3, we see that Amnon was, in fact, David's firstborn. And we see the sons of David defined in chapter 3 before he was king of all Israel, and in chapter 5 after he was king of all Israel. So we know who all the sons of David were. Going on in today's reading, after 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited the king's sons. So here's a pretense of a circumstance in which there was an excuse to have the family together, and Absalom intended to take advantage of it. And now I hear birds in the background, so I do ask your forgiveness of these noises. And Absalom came to the king and said, "Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." But the king said to Absalom, "No, let us not all go, lest we all be burdensome to you." So the king didn't, in my mind's eye, David didn't want to go out and watch all this sheep shearing. And this was a kind of celebratory situation. It was an interesting thing among people that keep sheep. Sheep shearing is kind of a party, festival type engagement. I've seen this in documentaries nowadays, even among people that keep sheep. It's a kind of a big thing for everybody to get together and shear the sheep. He pressed him, but he would not go, but he did give him his blessing. So Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." And the king said, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom pressed. And Absalom must have been a good arguer. And we're going to see more about Absalom later, and very persuasive person. So we can see from what we learn about him later why he might have had such a persuasive effect on people. But when Absalom pressed him, the king let all the sons go with him. So Absalom commanded his servants when they got there, "Mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. And do not fear, because I have commanded you." Or have I not commanded you? So he was telling his servants that they had no reason to be fearful of taking this action against Amnon, because he had given the order. Now, this, I believe, is tied back to not just Absalom being a prince and Amnon being a prince, but the concept of an avenger of blood. Now, we tend to think of the avenger of blood in regards to accidental deaths or deaths that may or may not have been accidental but have the appearance of an accidental nature. And the people guilty of those kinds of circumstances would flee to the cities of refuge. And then an avenger of blood was not allowed to go in pursuit of that person into the city of refuge. And it's all kind of complicated. It's very unclear from a simple reading of the law who this avenger of blood is. But Absalom here is playing the role of avenger of blood, and his command to these servants, I think, is an indication that he's telling these men that they would bear no guilt in their participation here, because he was an avenger of blood. The circumstance of the violation of Tamar was a violation of the law that could result in death, and that his role was to carry out that death, and their help in this would not be held against them. They would not be considered murderers for their work here. And of course, we don't know what ultimately happened to these servants, but it is an interesting thing that this is recorded here, and then we don't hear anything else about them. So it says in verse 29, "So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose in a panic, and each mounted his mule and fled. So they all ran off in fear that their own lives were in danger. While they were on their way, the news about the situation arrived to David before any of them had arrived. And the news was Absalom had struck down all the king's sons, and not one of them had been left alive. The king arose and tore his garments, and lay on the earth in mourning, just totally overwhelmed with fear of this news. And all the servants who were standing by tore their garments as well. But Jonadab was here in the presence of David, not with the sons out at the sheep shearing ceremony. Jonadab, the same son of Shemaiah that had given Amnon this instruction in chapter 13, first part of chapter 13. But he said to the king, "Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar." Which tells me that Jonadab was Absalom's confidant. So here we have a little interesting conundrum here. Jonadab made these plans with Amnon in the first part of the chapter, and was apparently, and this is my opinion again, a co-conspirator with Absalom to put Amnon to death. And so this is an interesting thing, and we don't know anything else about Jonadab's participation here. So this is a weird circumstance that Jonadab is caught in here. "Now therefore let not my lord the king take it to heart as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead." And Jonadab knew that. So that's very, very telling to me. Continues in verse 34, "But Absalom fled, and the young man who was keeping watch there where David was lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him by the side of the mountain. Jonadab said to the king, 'Behold, the king's sons have come. As your servant said, so it has come about.' And as soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also and all his servants wept very bitterly," it says in verse 36. So Jonadab's statement had proven to be true. The king's sons had indeed survived, but Absalom had fled. Verse 37, "He fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur." Now, Absalom was the son of a wife. If we go back over into chapter 3, we see that Amnon was the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel, and Absalom was the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. So when Absalom's going to Talmai, he's going to his grandfather's home, and he was a king of Geshur. So we see here this relationship that Absalom had was to this foreign king. It wasn't like he was going off into the wilderness as David had done on occasions. He had run off to live as a prince in a different land. David mourned for his son day after day, so Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there for 3 years. And the spirit of the king, it says in the English Standard Version, longed to go out to Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon since he was dead. There's a footnote here that says that the comparative translation would be cease to go out. So David had holed up. He was not going out to see anyone. I think it's probably translated properly here in the English Standard Version. The intent was that he had ceased to seek out Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon's death, given that Amnon had done the thing that he had done. He just accepted that Amnon was dead and did not seek to pursue Absalom for this violation or perceived violation. Now, if Absalom was working as the avenger of blood in this circumstance, then he was certainly not to be held for this death in any way, form, or fashion. And that is another strange thing about the avenger of blood. So, the avenger of blood is an interesting study in and of itself. Certainly we as Christians are called to be forgiving, and we are to be forgiving because we have all been guilty of our own violations of the law. We are not to be judgmental about others who have violated against us, violated the law or violated something against us. We are to be forgiving. And this is a tall order, but it is one that I think we should happily yield to. It's a telling story. It's a hard story to read because of all the terrible nature of the violence toward family members, sexual abuse, murder, all these things done in the open before everyone, just as the Lord had predicted in judgment against David. Terrible, terrible thing to have the wrath of God fall on your shoulders. I hope you found a word of encouragement in today's lesson. I hope you will keep these things in mind as we face our trials from day to day. It's an interesting thing to see God at work in the lives of kings and realize that He's still at work in the lives of the leaders of this world today. We're in a situation right now, and we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters, both in Ukraine and in Russia. A lot of times we leave Russia out of our equations because we don't like what we see happening to the Ukrainians because of the Russians, but we need to remember that there are many brothers and sisters in Russia being called on to do things that are not right, and we need to remember them in our prayers as well. And there are many there who will suffer as a result. And we won't hear those stories as much as we hear the stories of our sisters and brothers in Ukraine, and certainly we should be prayerful about them. Our heart goes out to them. If you can find a way to support them, I hope that you will do so. There are many, many Ukrainians in the United States, and I have been surprised about how many people of Russian descent that I just knew as Russians have turned out to be Ukrainians, and I believe honestly so. I'm sure there are some Russians who don't want to owe up to being Russian rather than Ukrainian, but there are quite a few people that I had just previously considered Russian who are Ukrainians, and I think in offering them support and encouragement, we can offer some measure of support and encouragement to their families back in Ukraine as well. I hope you will do so if you have opportunity. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m., so please join us if you can. Hope to see you there. If you're sick in any way, please don't come to the auditorium, but instead stay home and enjoy the streaming service. God bless and have a great week.
My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My Savior, my soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. Lord.